Grow Your Own by Esther Hall. Sidney Bean and his mum lived in a busy life in a busy city. Every day, Mum put on her grey clothes, walked Sidney to school and went to work in a big grey building. Every evening dinner time arrived with a ping and came out of boxes and was eaten off knees. The nearest Sidney came to a vegetable was a mushroom on his pizza, and he usually picked that off. Until one summer holiday when Sidney went to stay with his Granny Milner and her dog, Vincent, in the countryside. "It's going to be a grand summer, Sidney," said Granny. "I think we'll do a bit of work in the vegetable patch." Sidney put on his Wellington boots. "You weed, I'll feed," said Granny. So she spread pongy manure all around the soil. "Ugh, what's this, Granny?" said Sidney. "It looks like Martian food." "Oh, that's broccoli, young Sidney, and it will put mussels where you didn't know you had them," said Granny. That evening, Sidney and his gran had broccoli and pasta baked for dinner. Sidney didn't think it was too bad for Martian food. After his bath, Sidney climbed into bed. He ached from head to toe. It must have been from all the digging. Or were his muscles really growing? The next morning, Sidney and Granny set to work planting peppers and digging up carrots. "Yuck," said Sidney. "These carrots are all covered in poo, Gran. I'm not eating those." "Oh, it's only a bit of soil, Sidney. We'll wash them off and they'll help you see in the dark." Sidney had to admit that honey roasted carrots were rather nice, although that night he still needed his torch to read under the covers. Sidney woke to the sound of squeaky wheelbarrow and he hurried outside to see what Gran was doing. What are those long green things, Gran?" "They're runner beans, Sid," said Gran. "They're full of energy and will help you run as fast as the wind." Sidney helped Granny make a tasty bean stew for dinner. That evening, he raced Vincent down the track. Sid certainly felt faster, and there was definitely something a bit windy about him. It rained heavily that night, but the next morning it was dry and warm. "Ooh," said Granny Milner. "That rain has worked its magic, Sid. Look at all these juicy strawberries. They'll put colour in your cheeks." Sidney picked a great bowlful, and he and Gran and Vincent ate every last one. When Sid looked in the mirror that night, he certainly did have rosy cheeks. But it could have been a bit of strawberry juice. Sidney and his granny worked hard that summer. They were digging up veg and picking fruit. Every day, Sidney tried something new to eat. That's good, trying new things to eat. Very sensible. One day, they even set up a stall outside the cottage to sell all the extra fruit and veg they couldn't eat. They sold out in no time. "I've just had a smashing idea, Sid," Granny said. But when Sidney asked what it was, Gran just smiled. "Wait and see," she said. The summer flew by. Soon it was time for Sidney to head back to the city. He couldn't wait to see his mum. As they waited, Granny busied herself filling boxes with fruit and veg. Sid told Gran that they wouldn't all fit into Mum's little car. "Wait and see," smiled Gran. Vincent barked at the sound of an engine and Sidney rushed outside to see. It it was Mum in her new delivery van. Sydney and Mum went back to the city. Sydney's mum was still very busy, but Sid helped her with her deliveries whenever he could. Mum didn't go back to work in the big grey building anymore, and they gave the microwave to the lady next door. And every weekend they went to help Granny and Vincent in the garden. Oh yes, Sydney really loved his fruit and veg. Well, all except mushrooms. And that's the end of the story. I wonder if you could try something new. Maybe a vegetable that you think you don't like, or maybe some fruit that you think is Martian food like Sydney says. Have a try and see if you like it. Bye for now.